More than 250,000 Syrians have lost their lives in 4.5 years of armed conflict, which began with anti-government protests before escalating into a full-scale civil war. More than 11 million others have been forced from their homes as forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad and those opposed to his rule battle each other, as well as jihadist militants from Islamic State. This is the story of the civil war so far, in 8 short chapters. Pro-democracy protests erupted in March 2011 in the southern city of Daraa after the arrest and torture of some teenagers who painted revolutionary slogans on a school wall. After security forces opened fire on demonstrators, killing several, more took to the streets. Opposition supporters eventually began to take up arms, first to defend themselves and later to expel security forces from their local areas. Violence escalated and the country descended into civil war as rebel brigades were formed to battle government forces for control of cities, towns and the countryside. Fighting reached the capital Damascus and second city of Aleppo in 2012. By June 2013, the UN said 90,000 people had been killed in the conflict. However, the conflict is now more than just a battle between those for and against President Assad. It has acquired sectarian overtones, pitching the country's Sunni majority against the president's Shia Alawite sect, and drawn in neighbouring countries and world powers. The rise of Daesh has added a further dimension. A UN Commission of Inquiry investigating alleged human rights violations since March 2011 has evidenced that those on both sides of the conflict have committed war crimes, including murder, torture, rape, and enforced disappearances. Government and rebel forces have also been accused by investigators of using civilian suffering, such as blocking access to food, water and health services, as a method of war. Hundreds of people were killed in August 2013 after rockets filled with the nerve agent sarin were fired at several agricultural districts around Damascus. Western powers, outraged by the attack, said it could only have been carried out by Syria's government. The regime and its ally, Russia, blamed rebels. Facing the prospect of US military intervention, President Assad agreed to the complete removal or destruction of Syria's chemical weapons arsenal as part of a joint mission led by the UN and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. The destruction of chemical agents and munitions was completed a year later. More than 4 million people have fled Syria since the start of the conflict, most of them women and children. It is one of the largest refugee exoduses in recent history. Neighbouring countries have borne the brunt of the refugee crisis, with Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey struggling to accommodate the flood of new arrivals. The exodus accelerated dramatically in 2013 as conditions in Syria deteriorated. The armed rebellion has evolved significantly since its inception. Secular moderates are now outnumbered by Daesh, whose brutal tactics have caused widespread concern and triggered rebel infighting. Capitalising on the chaos in the region, Daesh, the extremist group that grew out of al-Qaeda in Iraq, has taken control of huge swaths of territory across northern and eastern Syria, as well as neighbouring Iraq. In the political arena, opposition groups are also deeply divided, with rival alliances battling for supremacy. The most prominent is the moderate National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces, backed by several Western and Gulf Arab states. However, the coalition has little influence on the ground in Syria, and its primacy is rejected by other groups, leaving the country without a convincing alternative to the Assad government. With neither side able to inflict a decisive defeat on the other, the international community long ago concluded that only a political solution could end the conflict in Syria. However, a number of attempts by the Arab League and the UN to broker ceasefires and start dialogue have failed. The talks, which became known as Geneva II, broke down in February after only 2 rounds. The then UN Special Envoy Lakhdar Brahimi blamed the Syrian government's refusal to discuss opposition demands and its insistence on a focus on fighting terrorists, a term Damascus uses to describe rebel groups. What began as another Arab Spring uprising against an autocratic ruler has mushroomed into a brutal proxy war that has drawn in regional and world powers. Iran and Russia have propped up the Alawite-led government of President Assad and gradually increased their support. Tehran is believed to be spending billions of dollars a year to bolster Mr. Assad, providing military advisors and subsidised weapons as well as lines of credit and oil transfers.